My name is Dr. James Stone. I'm the inventor of the Cannulight device and I'm the founder and CEO of Cannulight Technology. So we are a New Zealand-based medical device manufacturer and we manufacture the Cannulight device. The Cannulight device is a medical device that attaches to a peripheral IV needle. So, when you go and get intravenous access in hospitals and clinics around the world, we're an accessory to the needle. So we attach to the needle and it basically tells you when the needle is in the vein and when the procedure has been successful. So I'm actually a dentist and I used to do a lot of wisdom tooth surgery under intravenous sedation. So the patient would come in, I'd place the IV line, give them the sedative, and then I'd perform the wisdom tooth surgery. And actually placing the IV line became the most stressful and unpredictable part of the whole procedure. And occasionally I had to send the patient home after I'd poked them 10 times with a needle. They've still got their infected wisdom teeth in, and I've cancelled a whole morning of clinical time. So there's a financial cost to me, but really I just felt terrible that this patient had been sent home and we hadn't performed the procedure that we'd planned on performing. So I started to look at the different available technologies that could help with that problem. Most of them were around kind of ultrasound imaging and vein visualization. There wasn't really anything out there that could help you confirm that you were in the vein when you're in the vein, or more importantly, when you weren't in the vein. So then I kind of came up with the solution, and that's how Cannulight was born. It's essentially a simple pressure sensor. So it fits onto the back of the needle. When the needle hits the vein, it recognizes the increase in pressure and it just lights up green or infrared. But if you kind of poke through the vein, or if you're in a moving vehicle, like if you're in a helicopter and it's kind of bouncing around and the needle kind of pops out of the vein, the pressure drops and the light turns off. And then you can get it back into the vein, pressure increases, light turns on. So it's really simple technology. In terms of how it works, but the design process has been long and complicated, and it's, even though it's simple technology, it's a very highly refined design. On average, there's an estimated 1.4 billion IV lines placed around the world each year. So it's pretty much everyone who ends up in a hospital setting. The average inpatient in a hospital setting, they receive 8 IVs during their time in hospital. That's the average. And with a failure rate of, say, 30% average, most patients, if you've ever been in the hospital, you will have experienced it yourselves, or you'd seen it with a family member that these IVs fail. So the market is huge. We also think will be really useful in perhaps developing nations that don't have access to those highly skilled clinicians or the ultrasound devices and the other more expensive technologies that help with this problem. So yeah, we've got a big market and we can help a lot of patients. Current standard of care, I would say the best standard of care is finding that nurse or that doctor, usually that nurse, who's just the best at getting the IV lines in. But they're usually very, very busy rushing around the ward looking after patients. So the standard of care at the moment is not using our device and having a go and accepting that 30% risk or higher of failure. In a hospital setting, when a patient really needs life-saving therapy, it's essential that you get that IV in. But in particular, if you're on a battlefield or an out-of-hospital emergency care setting, I've spoken to paramedics who have had to crawl into a wrecked vehicle to place an IV in a patient who's still trapped inside the vehicle. So in those really difficult environments when placing the IV is going to be harder, but the consequences of not being able to get the IV and could be the difference between life and death. That's where we can really add value. We've recently been approved for US military funding to test our Cannulight devices with the US Marine Corps in the field, and we've also received funding to develop an infrared version of the device that they can use with night vision goggles, which is quite cool. So Cannulight is a sterile single-use disposable medical device that attaches to existing market IV catheters. So this is a device here. and this is a little test balloon. So it's essentially a pressure sensor. So you put this on the back of the needle. When the needle hits the vein, it kind of lights up green, so you know that you're in the vein. If the needle punctures through the other side, it'll turn off, and then you can reposition the needle into the vein, it lights up green again, and you know you're good to go. So that's pretty much how it works. The potential market opportunity is huge. We've got a TAM of 24 billion, a SAM of 13 billion, and a SOM of 442 million. And that's with a 5% uptake of Cannulight in hospitals in North America and Europe, which accounts for about 2/3 of the global market. So it's achievable, especially when we consider the feedback that we've been getting from clinicians so far has been really good, and 87% of clinicians said they would use the device in difficult cases, but 47% said they'd use it for every single case. So when we start looking at, okay, well, perhaps our products could be used for half of the 1.4 billion IV lines placed each year, the numbers get pretty big. There aren't really any similar products in the market, so there's nothing that attaches to the IV needle and indicates vein entry. So it's completely novel in the market. I think the other technologies that aim to solve the same problem are more to do with imaging. So ultrasound imaging of the vein, or vein viewers, it can kind of tell you where the vein is located, but that doesn't help you with the actual process of getting the needle into the vein. So we're actually synergistic with those technologies. They're not direct competitors. I think the ideal standard of care would be perhaps to use an ultrasound or a vein viewer to locate the vein, and then use a cannulite device to find out when you're actually inside the vein. So yeah, no direct competitors. But the technologies that are solving the same problem, actually, we kind of see them as synergistic and potential partners. So the most important milestones to date have been approval for the US military funding. That was really important. The results from our first human study with the New Zealand Navy, that increased the first stick success rates from 27% to 89%, so like tripled the success rate of first stick access. 27% is really low, but that study was performed on a moving ship in the middle of the ocean, and there was a simulated missile attack on the ship, so the power went out, there were casualties around the ship, so it was really stressful, dark, moving, cramped conditions. So that's why the success rates initially were really low. You wouldn't expect that in a hospital, but yeah, to go from 27% to 89% was just amazing. And that was one of those moments that you think, okay, this could actually save lives when people really need it. So that was a big one. We raised $1 million several months ago at a 20 million valuation, so that was really nice validation for us. And I think our progress with the FDA, yeah, they're the most important milestones. We're basically at manufacturing verification stage. So we've set up our manufacturing line, and we're going through the manufacturing verification process. So making sure that the way we manufacture our devices is consistent to our quality systems. We are on a 510K FDA pathway. We're a class 2 device for the FDA. We're about to do our human factors validation testing next week, and we anticipate filing our 510K in June of this year. So if everything goes well, we could have FDA clearance by September, October this year. We've been flying under the radar for quite a while. We've got our patents filed now, so we kind of feel, especially with our traction with the military market, that we kind of need to present ourselves to the industry and to investors. We've got enough financial runway to get through FDA and CE clearance, but that will be at the end of the year. When we have FDA clearance, we're going to need a Series A raise of about $10 million. So now's perhaps a little bit early, but it's a nice time just to kind of introduce ourselves, present ourselves to potential investors, and just start those conversations. Well, obviously we're working on the infrared version for the US military, but we are also working on an arterial version that detects entry into an artery, and then that can be used for arterial lines, which are placed fairly routinely in hospitals. So yeah, we've got another couple of products in the pipeline, and also we would just like to see our products in hospital wards, clinics, primary care, secondary care clinics around the world, and not just in the military. So hopefully, everyday people get to see it and get to experience it, and just rather than just the military.